Welcome, everyone, this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at. Today, we have Laura from Rich and Resilient Living to talk about personal finance for reluctant capitalists. For those of you who aren't familiar with how Regina and I first, I wouldn't say met, but started to get to know each other better, she wrote a guest post for my blog, Tread Lightly, Retire Early, back in 2018 about PrepperFi, the mashup of preparedness and financial independence. And I think a lot of that conversation really overlaps with a lot of Laura's work, which is really the environmental sustainability piece and how it works with our money. And that, emergency funds and other kind of stability isn't always money-based, but we do live in a capitalist society and money still does run the world. So Laura comes from a more traditional investing background, but in the last handful of years, she has dived more deeply into alternative investments and options for her retirement and living today. And, is trying to walk this fine line between making sure we're financially solvent while not continuing to kill the planet and setting ourselves up for more long-term resiliency. And with that, Laura, I figure I'll hand it over to you to give us a little bit more of your background.
Okay, thank you, Angela. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening on Cinco de Mayo for this reluctant capitalist money conversation. So I grew up in a pretty community-oriented family. There was a lot of volunteering and just, service to others. And I think that and, really going back into childhood and having scoliosis as a teenager and having to wear a neck brace, a Milwaukee brace, it really kind of put me on a road of being a nonconformist, a community service-minded nonconformist who wasn't in the mainstream, from pretty much from my teenage years. And I say that because, I went on to become a Peace Corps volunteer after college and, so did that for 3 years, got my master's degree in Russian and East European studies, went back over to Poland with the State Department fellowship. And at that point, that's when my mom said, oh, there's something called a Roth IRA. You've got this fellowship. You're not going to have a retirement account. Maybe you want to start putting some of that money into a Roth IRA. And my mom had been in this investing club called the Money Mamas, probably in my college years or late high school years. And she had started buying stocks for me. And so I eventually did get jobs where I had retirement funds and I started putting them in there. And I was really frustrated with all of the options because even the socially conscious or the socially responsible and ESG funds still kept my money supporting sugary beverages and single-use plastic bottles and financial institutions with predatory lending practices and pharmaceuticals pushing products where, for which they have commercials that most of the commercial is this, warning why you might not want to take this product. And so it just didn't feel like that's what I wanted to be building my safety net on. Now, for full picture, I am in my early 50s. I'm single, I've never been married, and I don't have any children. And I will say that has probably, and I also have a very much I'll land on my feet type of optimism. And so, I share that because I realize that makes it, all a lot easier for me to go more rogue, the way I have. But between just not feeling like it aligned with my values to be investing even in ESG funds, and then in my journey, so about not quite 15 years ago, at the same time I was already questioning the money I was putting in ESG funds, I discovered, it was probably closer to 10 years ago, but at the same time I discovered, Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. I discovered the FIRE Move community and Vicki Robbins' Your Money or Your Life. And I also discovered something called permaculture. And so, Angela, when you introduced me, you mentioned that Regina had written this post, article about Prepperify, and permaculture has some overlap a good bit with, this prepper approach. But it's also a very rich, holistic toolkit. And while most people who do know it think of applying it in the landscape, it can actually be applied to all aspects of our life. And one simple definition I've heard recently for permaculture that I like is it's a holistic approach to meeting the needs of people and nature at the same time. And so that for me, between that, and one other thing I will say about permaculture that I might go into a little more later is it's really a way of trying to build and create synergistic relationships, because permaculture looks to nature as the model. And if we look at nature, if we look at undisturbed forests and ecosystems, they are continually enriching themselves through all of these synergistic interactions and relationships. So if we're looking to permaculture, we're looking to that model, and how do we apply that to all aspects of our life, including economics and finance. And so when I discovered those three things at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, I like financial independence, but I don't want to achieve it by investing in the stock market and putting my money into things that don't align with my values. And I don't want to be investing in things that I'm learning about in permaculture, how they're really going to negate the future that I'm trying to prepare for anyways. And so it's like, yes, I want financial independence, but then I want it the permaculture way. So what's a permaculture path to financial independence? And in permaculture, there are some really good tools, but they're largely aimed at systems change, like more at a macroeconomic level. And so I wanted to have the discussion, well, I'm an individual, I need to navigate this right now. I can't wait for the whole transition, the shift. So how do I navigate this in the interim? And so that's what I've been on a journey to figure out. And so with my money, I'll start with that since Angela highlighted that so much. So yes, as I mentioned, I started out with, conventional Roths and, more like traditional retirement accounts. I had 403Bs. I was working for nonprofits. And so as I was going on this journey of like, how are people investing in permaculture? Like what conversations are they having in permaculture? I started learning about something called the slow money, which is actually evolves out of slow food. And I was already familiar with the slow food movement, which is basically something that evolved out of Italy. It started in Italy. It was in opposition to the fast food movement. It was, about really slowing down to eat and appreciate the food that we were eating and eat really good food and pay the farmers who were, taking the time and making the effort to really produce and create this food, the money it was worth, because our conventional food system, food is, it feels like it's very expensive right now because of what's happening in the economy, but it's not really healthy food. And it takes a lot more effort to produce that. So slow money was this idea of that evolved from slow food, where people wanted to invest in, and thank you for explaining ESG, everyone, while I'm talking this through.
Yeah, maybe we should talk just a little bit before we get more deeply in this. I don't know if somebody else has if everyone could mute when they're not talking, but maybe we can talk a little bit more before we get too deep into this, into what ESGs are. And I don't know, Regina, if you want to talk, or I can, or Laura, but realizing that, the three of us are so deeply in this money space. Not everybody has all of these, acronyms quite as intensely.
The ESG funds are a type of index fund that, as Angela spelled out in the chat, stands for environmental, social governance. They're aimed to be more environmentally friendly and a little more equitable, and aware of social equity issues and those types of things. But as Laura said, that what that means, you really want to look a little bit deeper. So it's a good step to make if you're just going from straight index funds, which there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It just depends on which way you're looking to go and how much deeper you want to dive into things. But don't assume just because it says ESG that it's necessarily the best thing and is going to have a huge impact. Do a little digging, and hopefully Laura will give us some more information on where that journey took her. I think that's where we're going. But they're a type of index fund for those who are just getting into investing. And index funds are buckets of stocks that are grouped together so that you can pick one fund and invest in a variety of different companies all at one time. And that's usually managed by a company for a small or large, depending, but for some amount of a fee.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add that they're basically screens. They're screening out certain companies, but it's more that they're screening out. It's not that there is this great repository of companies with really good ESG goals and practices. It's less bad. Is what I would say. All right, so slow money. So then the first thing that really launched me in the new direction was learning about the slow money movement. And so slow money is affiliated with slow food, and it's people who wanted to be investing in their local food shed. So they wanted to be investing in local farms. They wanted to be investing in the local food businesses, the local ice cream shop that was using the milk from the local farmer, and it was also this, it really also had it put emphasis on this concept of patient capital. You were going to do this for a slower, lower rate of return financially. But another concept I guess I'll mention here that's a good basic starter point is this idea of thinking about a triple bottom line. If we're going to think about environmentally or socially conscious investing, a nice framework that is talked about, especially in business, is this idea of triple bottom line, where you're looking at the people, planet, and profit. Okay, so for me, this shapes a lot of my thinking, because yes, there's a financial return, but there are also returns and impacts to people and planet at play with putting our money anywhere. And so people were willing to take this patient capital approach with slow money because they recognized the value of investing in their local food shed, because because of the other positive benefits for it. And so I talk about slow money a lot because it was at a slow money meeting once that I attended in San Francisco that I learned about self-directed IRAs, because this wasn't a bunch of independently wealthy people that had extra money to be investing through slow money. It turned out a lot of them, like me, had money in conventional IRAs. But there is something, and 4% of Americans have their retirement savings in these self-directed IRAs. And this opens up a whole new ballgame, because you can actually invest in pretty much any legal investment. And that's far outside of the stock market, other than collectibles like art and wine and insurance and S corporations. And so that's how these people were able to invest in, local farms and local ice cream shops and other things. And so I came back and I started learning more about self-directed IRAs, and that's what I ended up doing. Now, I will say everything here, I am not a financial advisor. I am a green money and lifestyle coach, but just for disclaimer purposes, this is again, me not having children, feeling like I land on my feet, and this is really important to me. So I decided to take the leap, and I have moved most of my retirement savings into a self-directed IRA. And so I have found that sent me on a journey to find, okay, I'm not an accredited investor. I'm not a wealthy investor. I'm a non-accredited investor. And a lot of these more free range investments are often usually restricted to accredited investors. But I started researching and learning about a good deal of investments. And for me, a big thing was the local investing. And I still haven't done quite as much of that as I would like, but we all want to live in vibrant communities. And then we send our money off to Wall Street. We don't invest in our own communities. And so I've really been on a push and keep having conversations. It's not an easy lift, but there are places in Washington where Angela lives, for example. There's the Lions Club, the local investing opportunity network. There are these little pockets where local investing is happening, and we can take these models and do more of it. So that, I've invested. I have an ownership share of a local permaculture farm here in my area. I have lent money to our longest operating organic farm here in Tampa Bay. It was at risk of, we were at risk of losing that property to developers, and a bunch of us in the area pooled our money and lent it at a very low interest rate to save the farm. There's something called Steward. It's a platform. I think it's gosteward.com. They make loans to regenerative farmers. So regenerative, I think probably everyone on this call has heard the term sustainable. Yes, I think that's it, gosteward.com. The word sustainable, but there's another word, regenerative. And so when we talk about like conventional finance, the stock market, that's all built on extraction of resources and energy from people and the planet. And sustainable is really just sustaining and maintaining where we're at, which we all know where we're at is it's not a sustainable place. And so then there's this concept of regenerative. And so regenerative is restoring, rejuvenating, repairing. And so we can make conventional extractive investments, we can make sustainable investments, or we can even look for these regenerative investments. And so regenerative farmers, conventional farming has left our farmland so depleted. They're unhealthy, it's unsustainable, they're full of pesticides and chemicals. But regenerative farmers are trying to restore the soils, restore ecosystems. So how do we find ways to invest in regenerative things, whether it's the farmland or people or our communities, local investing? And I think there's a lot more we can do, in our community to just start having the conversation. There's a book called Put Your Money Where Your Life Is. And it's about local investing through self-directed IRAs. And when that book came out, I bought 10 copies of it. And I walked around my town and I gave it to the head of our Chamber of Commerce, the head of economic development in my city, the head of the Black Business Investment Corporation, and again, 3 years later, that unfortunately unfolded during COVID when no one was actually really at their office, but it gets the conversation going, and I'm in it for the long haul because I do want to invest in my community. And so, I've put a lot of time into finding these investments. There's crowdfunding, so there are platforms like WeFunder or Seed Invest. And so these are platforms where you can invest in startups. And, all investing is risky. People will say startups are super risky, but you can make small investments. You can start with $100 and just try it out. The first round that I did when I first started my self-directed IRA, these were the very first investments I made. I happened to get on WeFunder at a time when they had a Native American food business that was raising funds. You know, that feels so much better to me to invest in a Native American food business than a predatory financial institution. I found a neighborhood in Chicago, I think a low-income neighborhood of color that was raising money for a community building project. I invested in that, and every year they pay me back, you know, a little bit of interest, and then I'll get the principal back. I was able to invest in, you know, a number of other companies that felt like they had missions that were much more aligned with me. And so it's just been a journey of learning and connecting with others. There is a group called the Next Egg, and that is a learning community that's been created for those of us with self-directed IRAs that want to be investing outside of the stock market and investing more in the solutions than, you know, things that exacerbate our problems. So that's, I know that's a lot. We're already halfway through. I can stop there for that one.
And we will, I was going to say also, we will include all of these links in the description of the YouTube recording of this. So don't feel like you have to write all this down now. We will have it for you later in the description of YouTube. So
go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say, I was going to ask if you've had any situations where you haven't gotten your money back. I think that's kind of one place that people get nervous about, kind of like why a lot of us invest in index funds versus individual companies, because, you know, the long-term success of the index fund is more secure than an individual company. But you know, it's really intriguing to think about putting your money in very specific spots like this.
So I will answer that first. It prompts me. So my strategy all along has been to mitigate risk by making many small investments so that if that happens, it's not as much of a hit. I knew that going in. And I also want to say to everyone that self-directed IRAs are a lot of work. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to make it sound easier than it is. It is very hands-on investing, and it's a pretty strong learning curve. You know, but you can also make these investments outside of a tax-deferred account. As to the answer to your question, Angela, I have not yet. Part of this is these investments, a good number of them are pretty not liquid. You know, it's like there's not really, I'm not in a position, the way the businesses are going, there hasn't been a chance for me to lose any money just because they're still in the startup phase, or, you know, just because of the nature of the investment. Not all of them, like the steward loans are continually repaying me, you know, a couple of the others are. I did have one investment that I made through a crowdfunding platform. It happened to be the one I was able to find in my own town that they ended up going under, but for whatever reason, because in my self-directed IRA, I have created an LLC. So it's not me directly investing in my name. It's me investing in the name of this LLC. Because the check was from an LLC, they held it in escrow. And so I got my money back, but another person I know made the same investment, but, you know, from their personal savings, and they didn't get the money back. So that was a, you know, again, it wouldn't have ruined me by any means. I wouldn't have liked it, but so I'm glad you asked that, because yes, my risk mitigation strategy is many small investments, which again, though, makes more work and it makes it more cumbersome and time consuming. So this is something, it's important to me. I'm stepping up to it, you know, and so I'm willing to be going through this learning curve.
Laura, Do you have some of these things? Have you written about them on a website or something, like how or why you set it up as an LLC and how somebody might want to look at navigating that?
Yes, I do have blog posts on my website about self-directed IRAs and why I chose the LLC. There's definitely a financial reason for choosing that, the LLC model. And I have blog posts, I have a blog post called How I'm Investing to Save the Planet. I have a blog post on social justice investing. I have a pay what you can course on regenerative investing, that goes through what is a solidarity economy? How do we think about, participating as investors in a solidarity economy and patient capital, and what I explained about regenerative versus sustainable. And I include a list at the end of, all of these non-accredited, socially conscious investing opportunities I've found. So that's something people can access through the shop on my website if they want to learn more. But the blog post covers some of it too for free.
Do you have any like general statistics on like what your rate of return, or if somebody's trying to look at something like this compared to planning, like for me, I'm kind of hoping for a 4 to 6% return when I'm doing my investing. Obviously, it may do better, but that's my safe margin. Obviously, it's going to be different because each person picks different investments. But what have your returns been like if somebody's thinking about making this a replacement for some of their more mainstream investments?
Regina, I wish I were more spreadsheets and in numbers oriented to give you a better answer. Part of it is it's so hard when you're if you're putting money like a couple $100 towards a startup, and you're not going to get the payout for 5 to 7 years. I don't even know how to answer that. I can say, like Steward, their note right now, I think pays 5% interest. Some of them, there are impact funds in different communities where it's a lower rate of return, but they're investing in nonprofits and in the local community, in maybe home loans, mortgages, and like there's one called Community Vision that is 3.75%, but you can choose your return rate, and I think 3.75% is the max you can return. So it really varies. You can find, it's not going to, well, I won't say not, but, a lot of them where you do know the return right away, when you go in, they're lower, slower, again, more patient capital. But I would say even within that, you could find, easily between, 1 to up to 5-7% investments where the rate of return and you're getting that more regular, safer feeling return, as opposed to just sending the money off to a startup and waiting 5 to 7 years with bated breath to see what's happening. What's going to happen.
So this might be an alternative also to somebody who was looking at like CD laddering, if they wanted to have a way to do a little bit more good with that money and perhaps get similar returns to a CD. Yes. Maybe your money's not quite as liquid because you can typically get your money out of a CD with some penalties, but if you have a pretty long horizon and are just looking to save with some moderate interest, that's also an option. So that's good to know.
Yes. I would like to say, going in a slightly different direction but related, part of what gives me the confidence again to do this is also being steeped in permaculture and thinking, for me, money is just one form of security and it's one resource we have access to. And I sometimes wonder, given what could potentially happen, if it's the most fragile, speculative, volatile, and least reliable form of wealth available to us. I'm not invested in gold or silver or precious metals. That's not what I'm talking about. Those are very extractive investments. They're mined from the earth. But I do think, for me, part of my retirement plan is I've planted soap nut trees in my yard. You know, and some nut trees are essentially, I'm growing my own laundry detergent, shampoo, and house cleaner, and it's something that, you know, it'll save me money. It's something I can gift. It's something I can barter. And if I needed to, I could sell them, you know, and I don't know anyone else in my area that's growing them. You know, I'm building community. I'm learning skills. It's, for me, retirement planning, I think thinking about retirement planning as only money is really limiting and could be very much to our detriment. And I don't want to be a doom and gloomer, but I do want to be realistic, and I want to be adaptable and skilled. And I also feel like focusing on these, what I call multiple forms of capital, or these non-monetary forms of wealth, they make us so much more resilient, but they're also the parts of life that fill us with joy, you know, that give us that self-actualization and the satisfaction, you know, that sense of accomplishment of gaining a new skill, you know, of meeting your neighbor, of having that much more connection to community. Focusing on money is so soul-sucking. Look at what capitalism is doing to us, you know, and I find it so ironic that we're working so hard and jeopardizing our health earlier in life so we can afford healthcare to treat the ailments that we're giving ourselves in the process. We really need to rethink things, you know, about how we're doing this. It's so screwed up. And Angela, it kind of, I'm veering here and there, and please stop me if you want to ask questions, but it kind of also goes to what you were, I think you were writing in Facebook today, you know, like, we want to keep up with the men, we want what's due us. But, and I want to be very careful here, because I'm not against stepping up to money. I think we can step up to it, and I think we can use it in ways that transition us to the new economy, that transition us to something better. But at the same time, I think about that, and it's like, do I really want to win at capitalism? Do I want to win at what they're winning at? They're not happy.
Yeah, we use that kind of slogan a lot when we talk about things we do with women's personal finance, that if this is what success looks like, that we don't want it. So yeah, we're not opposed to doing well, but there's also some intentionality in what that looks like.
Yes.
Yep.
And I, you know, I really value the question about power. But Angela, what you shared today, you know, about that picture of you with, I think it was with your governor. I mean, there's a lot of soft power we can be going after in our local communities. There are so many local opportunities, you know, or just to serve on boards or to volunteer, where we could, you know, not to say we can't do what men can do, because we can. Again, I just don't know if we want to, but what are the ways that we could do it a little differently that are really, yes, guiding us towards something better, where we'll be happier in the process of doing it.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, you know, we're still, all of us are still making money, saving money, even when it's alternative pathways. I have what I call a self-directed REIT in the affordable LEED Platinum apartment communities that my company builds and operates long term. So I call it a REIT, real estate invest. Okay, yeah, it's a real estate investment trust, which normally you would purchase a share wherever you're buying your stocks. So kind of like Laura's talking about her self-directed IRA, I consider mine to be kind of a self-directed REIT, because it is a company I work with closely, and I'm involved in the creation of that housing. But I do get a quarterly payment that comes out of that is part of our retirement money. But it's still money, because we still do live in capitalism. So kind of part of my Facebook rant, I guess, earlier was about how, you know, we cannot completely step away. And so kind of back to the idea of, if we're doing something that is a passion project, or talking about like how capitalism might not be the best, then how dare we? And I think there is a very broad spectrum between, like, we are making our fortune from oil and gas companies, and we are making our money by supporting, local good, businesses and communities. We're still dealing with money. So it is, I feel like, a very hard balance to be saying that, yes, we're charging for something or we're making money from something because we still live in capitalism, but also not doing it the same way that the traditional cis white man has done for hundreds of years.
Yes, because, being a reluctant capitalist, again, it's not about not wanting to step up to money. It's not wanting to get money through exploitation. Going into Marxism, it's not wanting to own the means of production and using them in a way where you're extracting and exploiting the labor of others to make you richer while you're not paying them their fair part of the value they've created. And so, yes, from my perspective, again, it's not that earning money is bad. There is so much work that needs to be done to regenerate people and planet. There are so many opportunities to earn money addressing these problems, be it the environmental problems, the social problems. We can start earning that money doing all these wonderful things, and then we can invest it in affordable housing in our communities. We can invest in each other's businesses. And we won't be doing it in this exploitive way that is sucking wealth up to people who already have a lot of wealth and out of our communities.
Everybody who's in this meeting today in the audience, I just want to point out, at some level, you're doing what Laura's talking about because you're a member of WPF and you're supporting me and Angela doing this work and being able to bring more people in and provide education, small local owned, where am I? We're in the Pacific Northwest, but it can be really small ways that you do those things. Just starting to think about it more and being intentional and thinking about, where am I comfortable putting $10 a month and I don't even think about it, versus is there like another place where that money might be going more directly to the people who are involved with it? Like, can you find ways to get the same benefit for yourself while providing more of a benefit to the people who are doing the work? And I think if you look around, there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Yes, we need so many people to step up to the Green New Deal, or the, whatever the socially conscious, like all of the social work, and trying to find business models where the care economy can really draw in the money that it's so worth, all of this unpaid care work. I would love to invest in the things that I'm going to want and need in my retirement. I don't want to go into an elder care facility. I want to age in place at home with dignity. And so, I'm thinking about, what am I going to need? How am I going to retrofit my property? What community am I going to have so that, I have young people in a pipeline that I have really good relationships with, so that someone could stay on my property with me and be a caregiver for me. I have very negative opinions about our allopathic Western medical system. So many people, it's so frustrating to deal with the billing, the pharmaceuticals. I much more gravitate to herbalism, naturopathic medicine. It's like, how I would love to see a cooperatively owned home care business in my community that prioritizes complementary medicine, integrative medicine, and I would invest in that because it's going to support me in my future, in my retirement. That's the way I want to think about retirement, is, it's so much more than money.
I'm looking it up real quick, Laura. You just reminded me, there's a place in Portland, Oregon, and I think it's called Working Class Acupuncture. So it's a place that tries to make really low cost acupuncture accessible to the community. And I don't know exactly what their payment model is, but it seems to do quite well. I know a lot of people who've used that place. And so there are models out there to look towards. And it's really exciting when, yeah, it's what we can do when we try, but it takes work.
Yes. Well, and I have said a lot. If anyone has questions, I'm open to questions. I mean, obviously, Angela and Regina, you have got asked questions, and you're welcome to ask more. But if other people have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And I just want to remind all of you that Laura is also part of the Woven community. And so like, if you have questions after the fact too, she's been real active there, and we've got some really great threads. I should link to those that folks have kind of brought up this conversation about working within capitalism, but in a more, ethical way. So I will also share those links to the Woven threads. I do want to say that we are getting closer to the end of our time today. I feel like the three of us especially could probably spend a whole day, lifetime talking about these issues, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about, you talked earlier about a pay what you can course. I'm curious if you could maybe share a little bit more about that. And I really like your reframe of like, we don't have to look at ways that we can't make any money at all. It's how do we make money and have like a stable financial footing for ourselves without being extractive of other people. I think it's so common that we need to connect money to extraction that it's hard to think about how money can maybe not be extractive.
Yeah, it's certainly not modeled for us a lot, but it is out there and it is possible. And so I have a couple of pay what you can courses. One is this Towards Regenerative Investing. It's a beginner's guide to regenerative investing. And as I mentioned, I outlined, I kind of explain this concept of a solidarity economy. What does that look like? And then what are these more solidarity economy or regenerative investing options that I've learned about? So that's one. I have another one on building regenerative wealth. And so that is not about making investments in the way I've been talking about them, like a money investment in another company, but more along the lines of thinking about investing more holistically, like these non-monetary forms of capital that I've been talking about, thinking about community, thinking about, soap nut trees or a food forest, or just thinking more broadly about skills. So that I have that one on building regenerative wealth. And then the big new thing is the book that I co-wrote this past year. It's called Growing Free. And the free stands for financially resilient and economically empowered. So that's my co-author and I, that's our spin on FIRE, is instead of financial independence, retire early, it's financially resilient and economically empowered. And the subtitle is Building the Life of Your Dreams Without Losing Your Soul or Destroying the Planet. And so this is, it's very strongly shaped and informed by permaculture. So my co-author is a permaculture instructor, and the book actually comes from a course that we had taught together a couple times before we even compiled it into a book. But it's less of a personal finance book, although we do talk kind of in the way that Vicki Robin does in Your Money or Your Life about money. It's more of a lifestyle design book, because money is just a lifestyle design tool. It's the most powerful one our society orients and gravitates around, but it's just one. And so this is just, it's 400 pages of lifestyle design, strongly influenced by thinking in terms of, more holistically about wealth, beyond money. And, we have things like, little things like really prioritizing quality when you buy something, and longevity, and doing the research, into the brands that you're going to invest in, for things like whether it's a gardening tool or a car or, anything you're going to buy, just thinking about how to, and learning maintenance skills, how to maintain things so we keep them out of landfills and we don't have to keep spending our money on them. It's a really wide-ranging approach to thinking about, again, this concept of financial resilience. It's a lot about being resilient. And it's not about, I'm sorry?
And I like the acronym a lot too, because it is focusing on that resiliency part. And the closer I get to FIRE, it's arguable whether I'm there or not, but like the closer I get, the less the financially independent and retired early part seems to really matter, because I do keep working, whether I'm volunteering or I'm doing other things. Like I'm not looking to stop work altogether, and I may not need to be fully financially independent. I just want to have control over my life and not have to work 50 hours a week. So I think that's a very healthy outlook to talk about that being resilient and empowered versus just not having to do anything.
Yes. Well, and this is very much, our approach is not about designing a life you want to retire from. It's designing a life and work that is addressing these challenges that we have so many of, that you don't want to retire from, that you're passionate about, but you're doing it in balance. It's not, a 60-hour work week sucking your, risking your health to do it, but it's how do you, our target audience was, artists and creatives and permaculturalists and people who want to do good in the world, but struggle so often financially. But it's a valuable message for everyone who wants to start thinking a little differently about it. I think someone asked what the title again is. It's called Growing Free, Financially Resilient and Economically Empowered, Building the Life of Your Dreams Without Losing Your Soul or Destroying the Planet.
And Laura had asked, did anybody have any specific questions? Feel free, hop on with your camera or type them in the chat.
Yes.
And again, if you have more questions later that you can think of, Laura is both in Woven and in the WPF Facebook group. So you can definitely find her there. I feel like we're going to need a part 2 to this conversation, because I feel like we only got started going down this rabbit hole. So I just want to say thank you. And, it's funny, I've talked about, my local investments as being kind of a self-directed REIT, but I've never really considered how much of it is like an alternative, better non-extractive way to move forward. And it's kind of like, I think sometimes some parts of our lives are so much part of our life that we don't really consider it as being like different or like, oh, we need to do more. Kind of like you were talking about getting onto local boards and commissions. For those who don't know, I'm also the chair of my city's planning commission. And I'm always forgetting that is a volunteer position and that it counts as a lot of my hours. And I think it's easy to always feel like you're not doing enough. At least that's the way I feel. It's like, oh, but I'm not doing these traditional ways of, I'm not, I'm not calling my legislators. I'm not, volunteering, whatever. What?
No, they're texting you.
I know. But it's funny sometimes. I think when you start doing things non-traditionally, when you don't see it within this box, that somehow it doesn't feel like it counts, or you forget that you are doing something different. And I think it's also good to have these conversations and talk through them, because also you'll give ideas to other folks. So I guess I'm going to also just make one more plug for join your local boards and commissions. Even if right now you don't feel like you have the time to really dig into a self-directed IRA or look for these different alternatives for your investments, you spend a lot of your life doing a lot of different things. So if investing is where you're just going to invest in a typical index fund, but you're spending a whole bunch of your time, you know, you're going to your school board meetings, maybe you're getting elected to your school board, you're pushing your city to buy new parkland, you're, you know, doing one of these other things. It's not like if you're not doing all of them, you're not a failure. Our life energy is limited, and you know, where Laura has really, you know, dug deep into the self-directed IRA, you may be digging deep into a different place in your life. So you know, we all aren't going to be doing this same thing, but it does take a community of us doing things differently.
Yeah. Thank you.
I guess mic drop. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think it's great what you're doing, Angela. And yes, I would love to see more people join commissions and boards, but I would love to just see more people go to their city council meeting. You know, it doesn't even have to be as big of a step, but how many people have not been to their city council meeting or a civic association meeting? How many people don't know their neighbors? You know, just go meet your neighbors. Even start with there if you haven't started there yet.
Yeah, I with that, like, you would be shocked at how much, you know, a group of 5 people who regularly go to a council meeting on a specific topic, even in a larger city, if there are 5 of you who are regularly invested in a specific topic, odds are you can really shift the conversation. It doesn't take that many.
All
right.
right. Thank you, Laura. Have a great evening.
Yes, you too. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks to everybody for spending some time with us today. I think we'll be stopping our recording in just a moment.